Recently, I watched How to Make a Killing, and let me tell you what happens. A guard wakes Beckett and brings in Father James Morris, who offers cheesecake and asks if he wants to confess. Beckett answers by saying the story starts with his mother, Mary Redfellow, and her family fortune, then begins explaining how he was born into and pushed out of that money. Mary is introduced as a Huntington heiress worth billions, and Beckett jokes that money really does buy happiness. He remembers the night she met his father, then cuts to the family discovering her pregnancy. They order her to leave the house, and she is sent from rich Long Island life to Belleville, New Jersey, with nothing but the trust still waiting. Mary explains the trust to Beckett and tells him he can still inherit if he outlives the older relatives. She says the fortune will pass to the next oldest Redfellow no matter what. Beckett realizes he only has to wait for the others to die, and the idea settles into his head as his childhood in New Jersey continues. Years later, Beckett and Julia Steinway meet at a recital, and he tries to impress her with the claim that he will someday inherit a lot of money. She teases him and tells him he sounds like he is trying too hard. Nearby, the concert keeps going while Beckett decides Julia is exactly the kind of woman he wants to keep close. Back home, Mary makes one last request and tells Beckett not to quit until he has the right kind of life. She asks to be buried at the Redfellow Mausoleum, but she ends up in East Orange instead. Beckett stares at the burial change and decides he will go straight to the source and demand his rightful place at the family home. Beckett is sent through New Jersey foster care, and Julia fades out of his life. He wonders whether he will become a success or not, then jumps forward to adulthood. He works a respectable suit and tie job and keeps watching the Redfellow estate, waiting for the family deaths that might finally open the inheritance. Beckett runs into Julia again in the city, and they instantly recognize each other. They talk about where they live, where they have been, and whether they are still in Montclair or Belleville. Before he leaves, she asks what happened to the Redfellow fortune, and he answers that he will inherit it someday when he has killed them all. Beckett targets Taylor Exeter Redfellow, a broker who works in the financial district. He starts wondering how he would even commit the murder. Then a warehouse job fight blows up over his being moved to a worse position. Beckett argues that hard work should matter, but his boss gives the job to a 19-year-old owner's son instead. The soundtrack swells while Beckett takes the demotion and keeps moving. He decides he needs a real plan, not just luck. The next opening comes when he goes to Taylor's apartment and manages to get inside, setting up the first murder attempt with no backup and no clear escape. Beckett reaches Taylor's place and admits the doors are wide open, giving him a chance to get Taylor alone. He thinks about turning back, but keeps going. Then he suddenly aborts the first try and mutters about Baywatch, the boat, and the mess he has gotten into before starting over with more resolve. Beckett tells himself to time out and think before carrying out the killing. Taylor has already been hit with the deadly setup, and Beckett watches the room go quiet. He stands there until he is forced to identify himself, then answers, "I'm Beckett," right before realizing the murder went through. At Taylor's funeral, Beckett walks Redfellow and pretends to be family. He says he is Mary's son and Warren's nephew, shocking the older man. Beckett presses through the family introductions, remembering that Taylor seemed like a decent target and knowing the Redfellows are starting to suspect him. Beckett talks to Warren about Taylor's death and his own background, then gets asked what he does for work. He explains his family has been in finance for generations, and Warren invites him into the office. There, Warren offers him Taylor's old spot, says it is nepotism, and hands him a real job in the family business. Beckett starts learning the language of finance from the inside, including collateral, dividend, clawback, and debt. He answers calls, misses the meaning of the blue phone button, and realizes the wealthiest people in New York make money by keeping a percentage of what other people earn. He accepts that this job could help him manage his own fortune someday. Julia calls Beckett and asks about his married life, then reminds him he once asked her out while folding khakis. She pushes him to try again, and he awkwardly asks her for a drink. She refuses because she is married, but tells him to keep running into her, and he leaves wanting more. Beckett visits Noah Redfellow, a strange artist living off family money, and finds him talking about imposter syndrome and his day job as an artist. Noah flirts, jokes about being a cousin, and talks nonstop about developing photos. Beckett watches him stumble around the apartment until the encounter becomes his next opportunity. Beckett pushes into Noah's world and pretends to be a fan. Noah invites him in, talks about being recognized, and asks what he does for work. Beckett claims they may be cousins, then spots the chance to frame Noah and quietly set up the next death while staying close enough to be trusted. Beckett keeps fooling around with Noah and gets him to kick a beer bottle for the camera. Noah jokes about drunk girls at a party, and Beckett uses the distraction to move closer to the kill plan. The moment stays loose and stupid while Beckett prepares the device he has hidden in the house. Noah talks about secretly smoking in a shack and lying to his wife about quitting. Beckett keeps listening until the phone rings and the secret almost slips. Noah's wife Ruth comes home, introduces herself, and Beckett realizes he has to act like family while staying ready to make the murder look accidental. Ruth scolds Noah for having too much to drink, and Beckett is introduced as Beckham before Noah corrects her. Ruth asks Beckett what he does, and he says finance. She mentions changing careers to teach high school literature, and the conversation turns weird when Noah mocks Dickens and David Copperfield, forcing Beckett to keep smiling. Ruth and Beckett keep talking about jobs, school, and what they want from life. She says she is studying to teach high school lit, and Noah keeps interrupting with jokes about alarm clocks and suicide. Beckett sits through the awkward dinner, trying to look harmless while the murder plan moves closer. Beckett and Noah talk about San Francisco, kids, and living conditions until Noah admits he hates children. Beckett then explains the chemistry behind the murder setup, saying sulfur and potassium chloride in stop bath can make dynamite. He leaves the ingredients in place so the family will blame Noah's photo supplies when the blast happens. Beckett finishes preparing the explosives and explains that the bottles under the sink will look like ordinary cleaning supplies. He says the final ingredient is a spark no one will question. He then moves through the house looking for Noah, keeping the trap ready until the blast can happen. Beckett gets caught in the middle of the setup, and a startled guest jokes about catching him. He keeps acting casual while the others laugh, then thanks them for coming and slips away. The dinner ends with Beckett leaving after making sure the bomb has been planted and the family is still unsuspecting. Beckett and Julia finally get a private moment, and he tells her he thinks she is trying to get him alone. He says the timing is outrageous because the boyfriend dies just as they start falling for each other. He mentions the clock and the sheriff, but the murder is already in motion, and the next investigation is about to begin. FBI agents Linda Field and Matthews arrive and question Beckett about the Redfellow estate. He insists he is not an heir and says he only came with a friend. They ask why 2 family members died in a row, and Beckett keeps denying any connection while trying to sound like a normal office worker. The agents press Beckett about the estate and the family deaths, and he tries to sound harmless by comparing his job to theirs. At the office, a manager praises a young employee for hard work, then tells Beckett's coworker he is related to the owner. Beckett watches the double standard and keeps his lie alive. Julia shows up needing a loan because her husband's brokerage is bleeding money. Beckett listens while she says her husband inherited the business but not the talent. He offers to help, and she starts floating the idea of an under-the-table deal, which pulls him back toward her and away from caution. Julia and Beckett keep talking in the office, and she asks whether he has heard about the Redfellows. He tells her Taylor and Noah are already dead and wonders who is next. Julia warns him to make his move before the opportunity walks out the door, and Beckett starts thinking about the remaining relatives. Beckett narrows his list to Stephen Redfellow, a money launderer with plenty of enemies. He watches a church figure argue about wills and obedience, then decides the next death could easily be blamed on someone else. With only a few Redfellows left, he starts treating each one like a possible accident. At a church interview, Beckett talks to a preacher who boasts about presidents, foreign trips, and business connections. The man keeps showing off photographs and bragging about his reach. Beckett realizes this red fellow has built a public image around power, money, and religious cover. The church interview turns personal when the preacher claims famous friends and compares himself to Jesus. Beckett sits through the boasting until he hears enough to know he is dealing with another manipulator. The man keeps talking about being targeted because of his family name, which mirrors Beckett's own excuse. The preacher shows Beckett a sharp little knife and makes him touch it. Then he suddenly turns on him, saying he recognized Beckett before he walked in and knows he has already killed people. Beckett tries denying it, but the preacher keeps demanding the truth until Beckett admits he is not Ben Johnson. The preacher pushes Beckett harder, accusing him of being his cousin and asking whether he is from the Post or writing a hit piece. Beckett finally blurts out that he is Beckett, and the preacher reels from the mistake. For a moment, the killer and target both think they are talking about the wrong man. Beckett explains that too much pre-workout powder can cause a massive heart attack, which is exactly what he has planned for this family branch. The preacher realizes an investigation would be bad for the church, and Beckett leaves satisfied that another red fellow is vulnerable. He starts believing he can keep going without getting caught. Julia calls Beckett and asks him to keep a secret. She admits she was about to break up with her boyfriend that weekend and now does not feel as devastated as she expected. Beckett tells her she is honest, not terrible, and they agree to dinner, which pulls them closer again. Julia and Beckett talk about simple dinners, her work, and her husband lying to her for years. She says she is flat broke and wants something sweet instead of sour. Before the night can turn into more, she sends him out and he slips back into the murder plan with her apartment key. Julia brings Beckett inside and tells him they had an agreement. She admits her husband lied to her and she is broke, then asks him to tell her the truth. Beckett refuses, says he has nothing to tell, and keeps his secrets while she pushes for something real between them. They go out to dinner where Julia vents about students who want to be millionaires without real jobs. Beckett asks what she would do with $1 billion, and she says she would take him to a better restaurant. Then she says she might be happier making less money and growing a cactus garden. Julia says she never liked her fashion career as much as she thought she did. Beckett listens while she admits she may have wanted a smaller life all along. He realizes he has a good job and a new romance, and for a moment, he considers stopping the family killings. Beckett keeps moving because he still has not been caught. He says none of the deaths have even been investigated as murder, and he starts to think he might really be that good. Meanwhile, the Redfellow family grows suspicious, and Beckett begins choosing the next target. Beckett goes after Aunt Cassandra at a day spa instead of her secured houses. He poses as a customer offering teeth whitening, and the special ingredient in the treatment becomes the poison. She complains about the tingling as he slips away, leaving the spa staff to find a strange medical emergency. Uncle MacArthur boasts about owning part of the National Air and Space Museum and planning trips to the moon. Beckett watches the old man brag about spending millions while workers lack health insurance. The family money keeps moving upward, while Beckett keeps tracking the next branch to cut. Beckett tours a luxury apartment with a doorman and marble floors, and the place changes how he talks about his future. He asks Julia if she wants to live there with him, and she says yes. She also reminds him she liked him when he lived in Newark and rode the bus, which hits him harder than the expensive view. Beckett keeps living the upscale life and telling people he can fire them anytime. He mentions an engagement party and talks through the move from Newark to the city. Then he turns back to the family list and says the next Redfellow is probably obvious, while admitting he can no longer imagine hurting his uncle. Beckett and Julia discuss whether he is really content without the inheritance. He admits he might be, but their engagement party planning keeps going. They choose to host it at home, and Julia still worries about his family, while Beckett insists their mess has nothing to do with them. The FBI returns to Beckett's office and says their research proved he is an heir to the estate. He acts surprised and says he never knew. Then they ask where he was on April 10th. Beckett stalls while the agents compare notes and start closing in on his movements. The agents argue over blurry footage, a hot dog, and a suspect on the move. Cut to the boardroom, where a finance executive says to dump everything before the markets catch on. Another man refuses, saying he is not throwing shareholders to the sharks in one afternoon, and then chaos breaks out as someone collapses. A body drops in the room, and someone shouts for an ambulance. Beckett is told to find the person he loves and work at loving them because that is the only job that pays. He leaves with that advice in his head, while another family death pushes him closer to the last Redfellow. Beckett realizes there is only one Redfellow left. He remembers the old instructions about never acting under the family roof, then accepts that the final target is still waiting. He goes quiet, and the story narrows to one remaining death and one remaining chance at the fortune. Julia calls Beckett to a dinner party at the estate, and he tells her he has finally got the chance to meet his grandfather. She warns him he could miss his own engagement party if he stays too long. Beckett rushes toward the estate, knowing this is the one meeting he cannot waste. Taylor drowned, and Beckett grows suspicious enough to have a friend follow the surviving relatives. Julia asks him to finish the job, and he demands a $300,000 down payment. He then threatens to send a package to her girlfriend at Cordoza High School unless the checks are delivered on time. Beckett tells Brian to call Prince in Vienna and sell P&G under the wrong name. He moves north, shouts for someone to stop, and finally arrives to collect the checks. He grabs them from Julia, who calls him a sociopathic, conniving bitch, and he walks away with the payoff. Lyle complains that Beckett is only pretending to make money, but Beckett dismisses him and says he is the one Julia wants. Then Beckett admits he has already committed embezzlement and assault, so he forces the next phase of the plan. He kills the engine of the getaway and keeps moving toward the estate. On the night of the storm, Beckett arrives at the final dinner with Whitelaw. The older man asks if he has been working his way up the financial ladder and then starts talking about professional killings, broken heads, and dead competitors. Beckett listens while Whitelaw describes how money and conscience can be turned down to a whisper. Whitelaw tells Beckett that people get tired, lonely, and regretful, but he can silence his conscience if he wants. He keeps talking until Beckett realizes he is being studied like a successor. The conversation ends with Whitelaw praising Beckett's favorite relative and asking why he never helped her when she needed it. Whitelaw shows Beckett a trench gun that belonged to his great-great-uncle from World War I. He hands it over and tells him to draw a bead on something. Beckett takes the weapon and points it while Charles brings out pudding, turning the dinner into a direct trap. Beckett is rushed out of the house as someone tells him to head home quickly. He and the others move through the estate while the storm grows worse. Then the doors are sealed and the room turns into a chase, with Beckett trapped inside and the family closing in. Beckett runs for the exits, while someone yells that the doors are rigged from the outside. Charles has made sure there is no easy escape, and the family shouts that Beckett came to their house to kill them. Beckett realizes he should have taken the chance when it was offered. Beckett admits his final murder was not really murder at all, but self-defense. The sheriff's department arrives, and he is forced to stay while they ask about the engagement party and the grandfather he supposedly never met. He tries to leave, but the officers keep him at the house. Beckett says that this was not a moment for honesty with the person he loved. He only tells her what she would later hear on the news. His grandfather is gone, and the fortune is gone too. The rest of the household is still reeling, while Beckett measures what he has lost and won. Beckett repeats that this must be the right kind of life because he is finally rich. Then FBI agents arrive during the party, and one of them asks that a door be shut behind him. They tell Beckett he is under arrest for murder, specifically the killing of Lyle Archdale. The agents keep him in place while Beckett asks who they mean and says he has an engagement party to get to. Julia and the others stand nearby as he realizes he is being arrested for a death he did not commit. He tells them he loves her while the accusation hangs over him. At trial, a narrator explains that Beckett crossed state lines, so the case is in federal court and could carry the death penalty. Security tapes place him in the office at 5:03 and out 4 minutes later, matching the murder window. The prosecution then presents the letter opener and the fingerprints on it. The prosecutor says the whole case turns on a letter opener, then asks about the body and the supposed romance with Redfellow. Julia testifies that Beckett loved her his entire life and that she never thought he would do it. The jury convicts him of first-degree murder and a death sentence is entered. Beckett gets a visitor in prison and is told he has 3 minutes. He and the visitor trade old childhood insults, then the visitor hints that handwriting is important. Beckett remembers Lyle, admits there was a note, and starts pressing the visitor to explain what really happened. The visitor pushes Beckett to come clean and asks what he can offer. Beckett panics, tells him to stop, and begs for the truth before the timer runs out. The conversation becomes a power struggle over the note and whatever the visitor knows about the murder. With the seconds running down, Beckett tells the visitor he is going to die in 24 hours unless he cooperates. He orders him to give everything and sign it over. The visitor stands there while Beckett tries to force one last deal out of the prison meeting. Hours later, Beckett waits in his cell and says he thought Julia might come through. He asks whether she is coming, then settles in with his remaining hope. The story slows while he listens for the chance that could save him from execution. A prison chaplain recites Psalm 23 while Beckett waits for the end. Guards secure cell 15 and open the third gate. Beckett braces himself, then someone calls out his name and says he will not believe what is happening next. The final visitors arrive, and Beckett's execution is interrupted. He is told to go back to BLE, and he realizes somebody has come through for him. The prison staff and guards shift around him, while the plan that might save him starts moving. Beckett keeps waiting as the prison buzzes around him. The rescue or transfer is not fully explained to him yet, but he knows something major has happened. He steadies himself while the machinery of the prison keeps working, and his fate is still unsettled. Beckett finishes by saying the story is still a tragedy, but not because of him alone. He tells the listener that values and expectations made them think it would end differently. Then he repeats the line about conscience and